WTO and international trade. And in addition to that, he has published extensively in high impact national and international journals. At the invitation of international organization and governments, he has been a speaker on the WTO issues in more than 20 countries. And Das Saab is a very good friend of ours in the sense I think in 2019, we had a last brainstorming session on WTO and Indian agriculture. So both our colleague Dr. Sachin Sharma, you might be knowing him, he keeps on visiting us frequently. So they readily agreed to be there to participate in that and offer their services to the LAS. He is, Professor Das is a regular commentator in the media. You might be reading in Financial Express, Economic Times. So regularly he keeps on writing issues related to WTO and trade matters. His current interests include agriculture, digital economy, free trade agreements, sustainability, geographical indications, negotiating strategy. In fact, now in WTOs, when there were negotiations from Indian side, he was one of the negotiators there, so that our interests are not harmed in those countries. While working in a Nectar India program, he was actively involved in enhancing awareness about geographical indicators and facilitating GI registrations, which is of course very important, of almost 20 products at that time. That include, of course, your lychee from Bihar, Muzaffarpur lychee, Banarsi sarees, brocades and brocade, Lucknow chicken curry, again, you know, a very important item from Badhoi carpets, Kosa silk, and Kutch shawls, and so many other. So, of course, in agriculture, of course, side from it is only the lychee, but he will be today speaking on the GI for agriculture products. So, with this brief introduction, I hand over the everyone to chair this session. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vithal. I invite Dr. Das for agreeing to deliver this lecture. It's a very important topic. Thank you, Dr. Vithal, for organizing such lectures for the benefit of all the scientists. So this topic given to Dr. Das and for his activity is very important, very pertinent. You see, we have a very rich heritage in India, and especially this geographical indication is a potential for India to grow. When I was a member of this GI committee for 3 years, I could see a lot of applications and a lot of potential. And in agriculture, we try to promote how more and more applications can come for this. So through my dual role as a PPP-FRA Registrar General, and I was a member of this ITP-RFA GB member also. So in the dual capacity, I made it sure that more and more applications can be filed, and we could a lot of progress. Now you can see a lot of applications from agriculture are coming, especially from applications just from rice, whether it's from West Bengal, Govind Bhog. Govind Bhog, I think, is still not there, but Kala Jeera is with GIs, and then that Mush rice from Srinagar. Personally, I went there and talked to the community. It was a wonderful rice. That is jag rice, separate. So both should be awarded through PPFI, and then ask them to apply for this GI also. So if you see rice itself, we have more than 28,000 kinds of varieties. Earlier we had 1.25 lakhs, but money have been lost. Now we have just 28,000 around. So that is only the rice. But if you see ginger, if you see lemon, palm, many agriculture commodities, you can see that a lot of scope is there. So it will be a very good lecture from Dr. Das. Any insights he will give us. So thank you, Dr. Das, again, and over to you. Yes, yes, we should welcome him.
We have changed the tradition.
Thank you.
This is quite
मैं उधर आता हूँ इस the presentation
शेयर कर दो सर स्क्रीन आजकल चल रहा है
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Thank you, Professor Beethal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, for me, it's a matter of tremendous privilege to be amidst all of you to talk about something which is very close to my heart, that is geographical indications. As I was telling Professor Beethal when I was climbing up the stairs, that one place where I'm really delighted to come is any institution connected with Indian Council for Agricultural Research. I remember first time I came to this place was in 1978. I was perhaps in class 8th or 9th. The Delhi government had some of the important places, scientific institutions in Delhi. And high point was a visit to what used to be called the Pusa Institute there. But of course, that has really evolved over the years. So I'm really delighted to be back here. I'll be talking on geographical indications, unlocking the economic potential. But I also realize that the issue of GIs, geographical indications, may be somewhat new to a few of you. So I will go through some very basic issues. Then I will spend some time towards the end on how to unlock the economic potential, what role could all of you have. Of course, if whatever I'm saying is not clear to any of you, don't hesitate to stop me then and there to raise your doubt. Right. Now, when you hear the term geographical indication, the first point to remember is that geographical indication is a signifier which tells you that a particular product, quality, or characteristics or reputation is linked with the place of production. Let's take the example of Darjeeling tea. All of us know that if we see a box which has the logo of Darjeeling tea or the name of Darjeeling tea, we get a reassurance that yes, we are recording in particular quality, and we get a reassurance we are even willing to pay a slightly higher price. But how is Darjeeling tea legally protected as a GI? We will go through those steps shortly. But the first point to remember is that geographical indication is a form of legal protection to products whose quality or characteristics or reputation is linked with the geographical area where the product is produced. Some of you might ask, what about services? Are they also covered under geographical indications? Interesting thing is the rules at the WTO, the way they exist, do not explicitly provide for GI protection for services. But having said that, GI protection for services are not ruled out. The basic international agreement to which countries are signatories in this area is the TRIPS agreement, many of you would be aware of it, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, which requires all the members of the World Trade Organization to protect geographical indications against unauthorized use that could be misleading or that could constitute an act of unfair trade protection. I will not go too much into the details of what the TRIPS agreement says, but effectively what the TRIPS agreement requires is countries must have a system for legally protecting geographical indications against unfair practice, against consumers being misled. And not only that, in respect of a narrow category, namely wines and spirits, what the TRIPS agreement gives is a higher level of protection. So let me illustrate these two concepts with a concrete example. If someone wants to sell sparkling wine in India, someone produces sparkling wine in India and wants to sell it as champagne produced in Nasik, is prohibited from doing that, because there is a higher level of protection for wines and spirits. On the other hand, Amul produces mozzarella cheese, Amul produces Emmental cheese. These are protected geographical indications in European Union. If European Union files an application for geographical protection in India, Amul can legitimately argue that it is not misleading the consumer. It is saying Emmental cheese produced in India. So Amul might have some case against it. But if Amul were producing sparkling wine and if Amul wanted to sell sparkling wine as champagne produced from India, then that would have violated the agreement. So the short point to remember over here are the following. For a product to get the legal protection as a geographical indication, it has to be registered in that territory. If you do not register a product in a particular territory, then you cannot claim benefits of the legal protection provided by geographical indication. Now, what all can be the nature of a GI? It could be a words. For example, let's say Banarsi saris and brocades. That is the term used for, that's the legal term used. It could be a logo, the logo of Darjeeling tea that depicts the GI for Darjeeling tea. It could be pictures, it could be iconic symbols. Also bear in mind that when we try to talk of GIs, although there's a link with geography and the place of production, the terminology itself need not include the geography. Darjeeling tea is a good example where the terminology geographical indication includes the place of production. But let's look at something like Shahi Lychee of Muzaffarpur. Shahi Lychee itself does not have the geography indicated over there. Or feta cheese of Greece. Again, that does not have the place. So the point to remember is geographical indication may include within the terminology the geography where the product is produced, like Banarsi saris, it has Banaras as the geography, or Darjeeling tea or Nilgiri tea, or it could also include other products where it could also include other indications like Shahi Lychee, where the geography of the place is not mentioned. What could be the consequences of not protecting your unique product as a geographical indication? Competitors not having the legitimate right may free ride on the reputation of the product. To give you an illustration, let's say that someone produces tea in Sri Lanka and claims that it is Darjeeling tea and wants to sell it in India. Now, if Darjeeling tea did not have a GI protection, then legally we could not have prevented that. I'll just come to you in a minute, sir. Legally, we could not have prevented that seller of tea produced in Sri Lanka from calling his tea Darjeeling tea. Yes, you had a question, sir, please.
There are no
सर बाद में लेंगे, सर बाद में लेंगे।
इन्होंने खुद ही बोला था।
एक ले लेते हैं, let's ask एक सवाल जरूर पूछ
Sir,
लीजिए।
lot of Indian scientists are working abroad.
Right,
Their genes are of Indian origin.
right.
What about their outcome of their contribution? Can as a country India, I can claim all their outputs that they belong to India because their gene
You cannot. You cannot.
Why?
That sort of a protection is not accorded under the TRIPS agreement. Geographical indication is about products.
No, about genes. I because of genes.
That's okay, but a product may be because of genes, but what you're talking of is the output of those products.
Someone इसको भी discuss करेंगे, but
Well,
as far as I know,
that cannot be protected under geographical indication.
the biological processes are not protected, but if you do some addition in that, जो जैसे बहुत famous case में आपने सुना होगा, BT वाले जो case थे, उसमें भी genes का ही चला था. So because that was the modified, they added some protein, so that was protected, not the gene as it is.
Gene as it is.
As it is, you cannot protect. So it's a debatable question, and it went with the Supreme Court. So it's
It's a very serious question.
It's a serious question, absolutely, but
as per
not
the,
protected
law,
under the TRIPS agreement. So first thing is, if your product is not protected as a GI, then your competitors may free ride on the reputation. And the price which you might have got for your product, an inferior product which does not have the quality or characteristics or reputation, that might end up benefiting from your reputation. Then loss of revenue for genuine producers, no assurance to the consumers that what they are buying is the genuine product, and of course, loss of reputation for the genuine product. If I'm drinking tea which is made in Sri Lanka but which is sold to me as Darjeeling tea, and if Darjeeling tea were not to be registered as a GI, then I would think, oh, is this the taste of Darjeeling tea? Darjeeling tea is no good. Let me switch to some other tea. So lack of GI protection in a way would undermine the reputation, dilute the reputation of the genuine product. Now, importance of protection is prevents illegitimate, illegal entities from free riding on my reputation. It conveys a quality assurance to the consumer through appropriate brand building. Production can be leveraged for enhancing sales. And of course, it's a very effective tool for preserving heritage products. We have seen in the case of Banarsi saris and brocades that a lot of Chinese silk saris were being sold as Banarsi saris and brocades. But after the GI protection, the producers who have the right, they can legitimately prevent Chinese saris from being sold as Banarsi saris and brocades. So it's a good, effective tool. A very quick look at the difference between GI and trademark. Bear in mind that GI is a collective right. All producers of Darjeeling tea in those 87 gardens in West Bengal, they can use the Darjeeling tea GI logo. Whereas when it comes to trademark, it's an individual right. It's not a collective right. Trademark you can assign. GIs you cannot assign. So these are some of the important distinct differences. Now, why are we talking of GIs? The simple reason why we are talking of GIs is in an increasingly competitive world when margins are very narrow, it's important to distinguish similar looking, similar tasting products. One way of doing that is through GI protection. GI gives you an assurance of quality, characteristics, and reputation. Is there any evidence that products which have GI protection, consumers are willing to pay higher price? We have some evidence, but mainly out of India. European Union, in the context of European Union, many studies have been undertaken, which shows that the consumer is willing to pay a higher price for GI protected products. We had done a study in UNCTAD. Unfortunately, we couldn't publish that study because of paucity of time. We done a very comprehensive survey of more than 120 odd products, where what we found was that in respect of agricultural products, the prices which the producers would get could be as high as 10 to 15% for GI products which benefit from a GI tag. Whereas for non-agricultural products, this premium price would be slightly lower, between 5 to 10%. But the important point to bear in mind is that there is evidence that a product which has a geographical indication, and if that geographical indication is suitably leveraged for brand building, for enhancing sales, then yes, the producers can get premium prices. A quick look at what is the basic framework of law in India. In India, we have a sui generis law for protecting geographical indications. The details have been provided in the slide. This act is called Geographical Indication Registration and Protection Act of 1999, pursuant to which we have the GI registration and protection rules. These came into force in 2003. And the important point is, for a product to benefit from a GI registration, to benefit from GI protection, it needs to be registered under the Act. Now, the registration process is quite long, fairly complicated as well, very rigorous. But before we go into the registration process, what can be registered as a GI? It could be agricultural goods, for example, turmeric, for example, ginger, rye, mango, apricot. It could be natural goods. For example, there was an application for Jamnagar Petroleum that got rejected. Then registered GI is agates from Cambay. Agates are a natural product. That is a registered GI. Then we have foodstuffs, Tirupati Laddu, Hyderabadi Halim, Rasgulla of both Bengal and Orissa. These are registered GIs. Then we have goods of handicraft and industrial goods. The important point to remember is that the production, processing, and preparation must take place within the territory for which the geographical indication has been granted. Who all can seek registration? It could be the proprietor, it could be the user. Where do the applications have to be filed? There's a GI registry in Chennai. For how long is a GI protection valid? Initially for 10 years. At the expiry of 10 years, the GI holder has to file again. So renewal, the GI protection is renewable. Initially, if you look at who benefited from GI registration in India, rather who all filed the GI applications, you'll be very surprised. It was mainly government agencies who filed. And this was not very useful for the very simple reason that government agencies would file, they would get the GI certificates, and then wouldn't know what to do with the GI certificate. Then they would get into a process of trying to educate the producers of benefit of GI certification. So the GI registry realized that this was a problem. And now increasingly what the GI registry in Chennai is insisting is that the application for a GI protection must be filed by an association of producers. A very good step, but do you appreciate the problem in that? The basic problem is, let's say any simple product, lychee was something with which I was very closely involved. It's very small farmers producing lychees. How do you explain to them the legal requirements of how to file the application? How do you explain to them that once the application is filed, they'll be cross-questioned and what all they have to answer in the cross-questioning? So it's a very big challenge that if small farmers have to form an association to file an application for GI protection, then in large number of cases, the products will not be registered. Products, even the application will not come through. So now a healthy tradition has started where some agencies are getting into helping farmers form these consortiums or associations, and then in a way helping the farmer groups or artisan groups to file the application and go through the entire process. In fact, one of the persons with whom I was working very closely in UNCTAD, he has facilitated filing of almost 50 odd GI products, and he subsequently got a Padma Shri for that. So that is a good way through which the problems of small farmers, poor farmers, artisans, if they have to seek GI protection, how do they go forward? That is one way through which social entrepreneurs can help address the problem. I will not go too much into the detail of the process, but effectively what the application requires the applicant to do is to give evidence of first to describe the quality characteristics, reputation of the product, give evidence why these are inextricably linked to the geographical area where the product is produced, then further give evidence of why this quality characteristic or reputation is not new. It has been known for many years, decades, in certain cases, centuries as well. In fact, when it came to the GI application of some of the textile products, the GI registry wanted references going back 300, 400 years, and these could be provided. So that really shows that the reputation was not transient. It was a reputation of the product which has persisted over literally centuries. And if those evidences are provided in the GI application, then the GI application normally doesn't face too much of hurdles. There is a process through which the application is very closely scrutinized. Opposition to applications are entertained. As the chairman was mentioning, there's a committee of experts which examines the application. It cross-questions the applicants. It also looks at very simple things like the geography which is claimed for GI product or how the product is produced. Let me share an anecdote over here. I was working closely for Banarsi saris and brocades, and the GI application was for handmade Banarsi saris and brocades. So in Banaras, we had two categories: handmade people and machine-made Banarsi saris and brocades. So those who are making Banarsi saris and brocades not through that normal loom, but through machines, they were up in arms. They said, sorry, we will not let this application go through. Eventually, better sense prevailed. And what happened was that the GI application, which is certificate which was granted for, was for handmade saris and brocades. So what is the exact production process? That again is important to mention in the GI application, because that will thereafter have implications for the producers who can take benefit from the legal protection. Also bear in mind that Indian products need to register abroad to get GI protection, and similarly, foreign products need to be registered in India if they have to benefit from GI protection in India. Registration is necessary for protection in India, and the process for GI registration for domestic products and foreign products in India is identical. And as we will see, India, we have already registered a large number of foreign products. This I will not elaborate much, but in a flow chart, it effectively captures the entire process of filing the application, intermediate steps, and eventually securing the GI certificate. Infringement of GI. Let's assume that I make some saris and brocades in New Delhi and try to sell it as Banarsi saris and brocades. If caught, I can face a jail term between 6 months to 3 years. I can be fined anywhere between 50,000 rupees to 2 lakh rupees. So it can be a deterrent. But the important point is, for a right holder, he needs to have a mechanism to detect instances of infringement, and he must have pockets deep enough to prosecute the offender. Indian experience so far till end of March of this year, about 430 odd products have been registered. 28 foreign GIs have been registered in India. And out of these 430 odd products, I could identify about 158 products which fall in the category of agriculture and food products. A quick look at some of the foreign products which are registered in India. Most of them relate to wines and spirits. For example, we have Peruvian pisco, cognac, champagne, Napa Valley wine, then the Mexican tequila, and then we have Parma ham, Parmesan cheese, and a few other varieties of cheese. So these are some of the foreign products which have been registered as GI in India. Before we come to the before we come to a description of the agricultural GIs, a very quick look at how the agricultural GIs which have been registered, which are the states most active and beneficiaries of it. Maharashtra by far is the most active. 26 agricultural products of Maharashtra are registered as GIs. Karnataka is second, Kerala is third, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Assam, Bihar follow in the order. Now, what about very specific products? If we look at rice, then we have about close to 18, 19 19 varieties of rice which appears to be registered as a GI. So you have basmati, of course, which is the most celebrated variety. Then about 6-7 varieties of rice from Kerala. There is a matta rice, then there is pokali rice, and few other varieties of rice in Kerala. Then from Assam we have Johar rice, Boka rice. From Bihar, there is Katarni rice. From Uttar Pradesh, there is Kala Namak rice. So rice really has the largest number of registered GIs. Mangoes, 12 varieties of mangoes. Of course, for us, the most popular GI in mango is Hafus Alfonso mangoes. But then there are many other varieties of mangoes which have been registered. The chairman mentioned Lakshman Bhog. Yes, Govind Bhog. Govind Bhog is now a registered GI. Similarly, Malihabadi Dasheri is a registered GI for mango. Then Zardalu mango from Bhagalpur is a registered GI. Different varieties of chili are registered GIs, starting with Naga chili, and so on and so forth. We have different types of bananas which are registered as GIs. And when we are talking of bananas, let me step back and mention that one of the most delicious bananas is a banana from Karnataka called Nanjangud Rasbale. Unfortunately, we were doing a survey and we found that there were not more than 12 to 15 farmers who were producing that banana. So it's very likely that although that product has a GI protection, it may not really end up benefiting commercially. Just to give you an example of the variety of rice which is registered as GIs, we have Kala Namak rice, then Chinnor rice, Katarni rice, Johar rice, Nawara rice, Pokali rice, Govind Bhog, Boka Chawal, Matta rice, so on and so forth. Similarly, for a few varieties of mangoes I have mentioned over here. Gir Kesar is their Appemedi from Karnataka, which is used for making pickles. Then some other interesting products, Naga Mirchi, then 2 varieties of lemon, Kaji Nemu from Assam and Kachai lemon from Manipur. A very interesting form of Rajma is a GI which is called Bhagya Ghevada, if you see the stripes, it looks like a tiger. That's why the Vaghya word over there. Then Purv orange. Normally we would associate orange with Nagpur. Number of varieties of oranges other than Nagpur oranges are registered as GIs. Now, if you look at, I just tried to put together a slide. If you want to have a hearty meal, it can be just based on GIs. You can start with kokum juice, which is a GI. Then you can go on to salads, Naga cucumber, Naga tomato. Then you can come to the main course. The main course could be Hyderabadi halim, or it could be basmati rice cooked with the Kashmiri saffron. It could be accompanied with Munsiari rajma. If you're not very fond of rajma, then you could prefer Gulbarga tur dal. You could have Jalgaon brinjal as your sabzi. And what spices do you put? You could put Malabar pepper. You could put Kodaikanal garlic. You could put Sikkim large cardamom. You could use Kola chili from Goa. You could use Kandhamal haldi. You could use Bangalore rose onions. You could use Assam Karbi Anglong ginger, so on and so forth. And after you've had your meal, if you want to eat fruits, you could start with Hapus Alfonso mango. You could try apricot from Ladakh. You could try Shahi lychee from Muzaffarpur or Jalna sweet orange. If you want to have sweets, you could try Dharwar peda after finishing your meal. If you want to have beverages, you could try Nilgiri tea, Darjeeling tea, or if you want coffee, then you have, or you could try Kangra tea as well. In coffee, you have Malabar monsoon coffee of both varieties, Arabica and Robusta, or you could even try another variety of coffee, which is called Araku Valley coffee, which is available in Orissa and Andhra Pradesh. After having tea or coffee, what would you like to do? Maybe have pan. So you could either try the Mahoba pan or you could try the Maghai pan. Now your meal is over and you walk out, you want to wash your hands. What soap will you use? Mysore sandal soap. That is a GI. After having washed your hands, you would like to dry your hands, right, using a towel. You could use Sholapur dairy towel. That's also a GI. So the short point is that the variety of products that we have in the country, that really needs to be recognized and leveraged for increasing the incomes. Now, the problem is there is a lack of proper organization at the producer level, which are unable to leverage the GI for brand building and for commercial purposes. In certain cases, there is very limited production capacity. I have given you the illustration of Nanjangud Rasbale bananas in Karnataka. At times, some of the producers may not see the advantage of using GI as a tag. Then many traders sell both genuine GI products and non-genuine products. So controlling that is a challenge. Then often there is no formal single channel for quality control. Whatever has been the quality prescribed in the GI application is the product which is using the GI tag. Is that product complying with the quality prescriptions? We don't really have an effective monitoring mechanism for that. Then benefits of branding often is not clear. Then lack of resources for brand building, inadequate information about market opportunities, all these are there. So what needs to be done? And that's where all of you come in. First and foremost, creating awareness about GIs. Make consumers aware about GIs, mass media campaigns. The middle class in India, inevitably, all of us at least make one trip each year, either through train or through air. Maybe at the airports or railway stations, there could be an announcement that, well, your flight has landed in at Sanganer Airport and Sanganer is a registered GI, Sanganer hand block print. Or your train has just passed Nagpur. Nagpur is famous for Nagpur oranges, which is a registered GI. Or your train has just passed through Banaras. Banaras has 12 GIs, including Banarsi saris and brocades and few others. So that is one way of enhancing consumer awareness about GIs. And once the consumer awareness enhances, that in a way will have a spillover effect, positive spillover effect on the producers. Then of course, a need to create a umbrella GI portal and product specific databases on each product. Then listing the producers from whom the actual GI products can be obtained. Then I have very quickly put together a slide about how to leverage GI in brand building. Again, I will not go too much into the details, but the broad strategy is mentioned over there. And some steps have been suggested. Now, what further can be done? At this juncture, we do not have detailed information on what is the level of production, level of employment, level of exports of various agri-GI products. Will survey be done for that? I think that should be the starting point. Then revival of traditional varieties. I mentioned about that particular delicious banana from Karnataka. Can the GI tool be used in the first instance to preserve that variety and to make sure that the variety doesn't die out, doesn't become extinct? Then can we talk of creating value-added products? Most of our GIs are raw products. For example, apricot or the variety of mangoes we mentioned. Can we think of innovative ways through which those raw agricultural products which have GIs can be converted into preserved value-added products? That can be another useful step in facilitating, unlocking the commercial benefit of GIs. Then enhancing breeding prospects. Agricultural scientists amongst you, if we know that a particular product, agricultural product is a GI, doesn't have very high productivity at this point in time, can something be done through breeding which preserves the characteristics of that particular product, but enhances productivity? Then can we undertake research for highlighting health benefits? Can we also put in place a traceability mechanism which tells me that, okay, this is the consignment of GI product, it originated from this particular farm in this district, in this particular state, and it was harvested on around such period? These are the requirements to be fulfilled for exporting. And it will certainly help for national sales as well. And equally importantly, can we undertake a study, a rigorous study based on survey, to really explore whether consumers in India are willing to pay a premium price for GI products? I'm going to stop at that. I'll be very happy to answer questions.
Thank you. GI, in true sense, we have unlocked the economic potential of GIs, and that's the biggest challenge. We have a lot of GIs, but how really we can get the benefit out of this? So before we conclude, we can have few questions. But because there are colleagues connected online, so if you speak through mic, I think then only they can listen.
Or maybe you could just come over here.
Thank you. That's very interesting, especially to me, because I have a lot of interest in IPR issues, and I'm glad to hear all these things. But GI registration itself is a very costly affair, because GI claimed by one country and it has to be registered in the rest of the world. And if there is any dispute, then again a very costly affair. So it's a very tedious as well as costly affair just to protect the GI product. So my first question is that regarding this basmati rice, only two countries are there who are producing and claiming GI basmati, India and Pakistan. They have similar everything and they claim this. But We got GI in 2016 on Basmati. Pakistan got 4 years back, 2020, I think. So. My first question is that is there any confusion between these two countries to file common GI, or some other issues are involved? Because once we have GI in India, we have to register that GI in the rest of the world where consumers are there. If we go there, then Pakistan definitely will come. You know, India is not a sole owner of this GI. We are also equal. So problem may be. This is my first. This is my first question. Second question is, suppose GI means there is boundary, definite boundary. Suppose let's take example of this Basmati. There is Sagar districts in Madhya Pradesh growing Basmati, and traders are claiming this is exact Basmati has grown in GI area. But Sagar district is not falling in GI area, but that is there. So my question is that no, in GI boundary, let us say 1 kilometer within GI area and 1 kilometer out of GI area. If I have Basmati, is there any test to say this is GI product and this is not GI product? Only 1 kilometer difference. And last question is that no, GI, just like your Banarsi Shadi handmade and made, GI revolves around your geography, attributes and other uniqueness. It also protects indigenous knowledge, craft skills, everything. Is GI prohibiting or promoting that use of modern technology just to get better quality, everything better, using this modern ongoing technology earlier, which was not part of that area? This is my question. Thank you.
So might be directly related with this only, so that you can answer some things. In nutshell, if I say that GI, WTO, IPR, patent, it is all by the vested mafia internationally. It doesn't benefit actual the stakeholder, the farmer. As far as Dr. Shivkar asked that question, exactly, precisely, nature already provided GI to Basmati rice. Within the area of GI, that aroma will not be there. So you cannot be put in the category of Basmati. How will define it? How will restrict it? How will explain it? And India is one of the biggest center of origin of agriculture plants, as described by the great Nikolai Ivanovich Bibilo, Hindustan center of origin. What about those agriculture crop plants with the whole world survive? There are a lot of questions. I think this should have been a lecture for the whole day. It is a very less. Thank you very much.
Any other question before we ask the speaker to respond? No?
I'm very grateful for the questions, very relevant questions. Let me start with the issue of Basmati. Actually, what happened was that in early 2000s, India and Pakistan were in talks, and the talks had proceeded quite a bit. In both countries, doing the following: registering Basmati as a GI in their territories. India would register Basmati within India, Pakistan would register Basmati within Pakistan, both of them registering Basmati in each other countries, and in foreign countries filing joint applications. Because bear in mind that if I have to get a GI protection in UK, I will, or European Union, I will need to file an application there and get the GI protection. So this was the grand conceptualization that on Basmati, India and Pakistan will move together. And for about 6-7 years, we made fair bit of progress. But eventually, because of political turmoil, this fell through. And now we are seeing the problem. My colleague, Dr. Sachin, who is really the expert in agriculture at the Center for WTO Studies, He is very closely involved in some of these negotiations. What is happening is at the European Union, India has filed an application for GI for basmati, so has Pakistan. Now, European Union appears very reluctant to give GI protection exclusively to Indian basmati. Now, linked with that is the point which you raised, sir, about GI being very expensive. You're absolutely correct. For getting the GI tag, it may be expensive, but not as expensive as compared to what, let us say, the T-board has to spend in monitoring in other countries and identifying instances of infringement. Some of you might be aware that, for example, in Japan or in France, Darjeeling perfumes were sold. Lingeries with Darjeeling name were sold. So T-board had to actively file infringement cases, requires spending a lot of money, no doubt about it. But honestly, if we have products where there is huge commercial value, then there may be no other option. We may have to spend that money, and that's where the government has to step in. This cannot be left to individual entities. When it comes to monitoring, identifying instances of infringement, particularly in foreign markets, then maybe the government can put in place some legal cell which can do this, but it definitely requires investment of money. On the issue of boundary, you're very correct. How do I determine where the boundary for basmati ends? I really cannot think of any very pinpointed test. At the end of the day, I suspect it is bit of a balance between agroclimatic conditions, product quality characteristics and reputation, and maybe other factors as well. I'll give you the example of Shahi Lychee. When I was involved in Shahi Lychee, we were very clear that it would be the GI application should be restricted to just a handful, 3 or 4 districts. And it would exclude varieties of lychee such as Chinese or rose scented, etc. But eventually, a few years down the line, the application which got filed and which was accepted had many other districts which benefited from this application. And from the application, it's not clear whether the GI is restricted exclusively to Shahi Lychee or other varieties of lychee produced in those districts which are included in that earmarked geographical area. So again, no clear answers. There cannot be a black and white test that, well, this is where the territory ends, this is where GI will no longer be applicable. But that is, I don't think we'll ever have an answer to that question. On the use of modern technology, you're very right. We need to balance both. That is the existing technology and new technology. But that's where the benefit of GI comes in the picture. If we look at Western markets, products made by hand command a huge premium compared to machine-made products. That is what we have to leverage. And sir, going back to your very fundamental question about patents, intellectual property rights, I'm very largely in sync with you. The system of, I may not be very popular amongst many people, but the system of patent protection which is there in the world, which is what has been prescribed in the TRIPS agreement, is certainly not in favor of the consumer. The TRIPS agreement was meant to be a balance between incentives for the innovators and the consumers, but the way the agreement was drafted, the way the agreement is being implemented, there's a very clear slant towards the interests of the innovators. This is something that India is fighting for. This is something which India has been protesting. We want to make it a more fair system. But in the entire family of intellectual property rights, if there's any single intellectual property right where a developing country like India can benefit, then that is GIs. Patents, if we look at the cross-border flows on account of patents, copyrights, royalties, etc., developing countries account for less than 1%. And this figure has been less than 1% for the past 30, 40 years. So I have full sympathy with your sentiment on the patent system. So let me conclude with that. I'm very thankful to all of you for giving me your kind attention. Very grateful to the chair, Dr. Agarwal, and Professor Beerthal for giving me this platform to articulate my views on GIs. If I have been able to trigger some interest in even 4 or 5 of you to do further work in some aspect of GI, I would be more than happy, and I would think that my task was completed with some satisfaction. So there's a question in the chat box. What is the question?
Speaker on करते हैं.
Completed with some satisfaction. So
इधर वो करेंगे ना सर.
what is the question? There's a raised hand.
You want to talk?
The question is, suppose if we want to assess the economic impact of GI on producers, what is the way ahead?
Okay.
Is there any other way than assessing consumer willingness to?
There are 2 possible ways. One is looking at what the consumer is willing to pay, and second is looking at the actual incomes of the producers. When it comes to the actual income of producers, I'll take 2 more minutes. We did a small survey in Rajasthan of the weavers and master weavers involved in Kota Doria. We got some very surprising findings. Within a span of 4 or 5 years after Kota Doria became a geographical indication, forget the master weavers, their incomes really multiplied. Even ordinary weavers, their incomes doubled. More importantly, this got translated into a very positive social impact. Brides from the weavers' families, their marriage prospects improved. So that might appear surprising, but that was a very interesting thing we found from this socioeconomic survey. So as I mentioned, 2 aspects. You can look at the consumer willingness to pay, or you can actually look at what happened to the producer's income. But bear in mind that if no brand building activity is done, if the GI is not leveraged for increasing sales, then sales will not increase, as was evident in one of our other studies. We did a study on Sholapur, terry towel, and chadar, where we found that the GI protection had no impact on the income of the producers. So the key thing is leverage the GI, do proper brand building, and that is what can unlock the commercial potential. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your very kind attention. Thank you.
क्या करना?
Yes.
And speaker होगा.
Yes, Coach Indra Devi.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I would like to get a clarification on one point, if you don't mind. See, for instance, if a farmer organization A takes the legal right for using the logo of a particular product, and another organization from the same locality wants to use that logo, so what is the procedure for that?
Can you give your question in the chat box? We are not able to listen
Okay, I'll do that.
this time. And then Dr. Das will reply.
Meanwhile, I have one clarification. Suppose a group of traditionally skilled producers of Banarsi sari wishes to relocate from Banaras to Delhi. So when they will be able to brand with GI tag, because the skills and product will be same, but they are relocating to other geographies.
That has been a perennial question, but the GI tag is for the product produced in that
So
region.
can we conclude it restricts out migration and dissemination of skills to other?
No, it does not restrict.
So which
You can you can migrate to Delhi, you can produce a product, you can sell it, but you can't call it.
But the product is same, value is same.
Doesn't matter, but the reputation is linked with the place of production. That is the underlying philosophy of GI.
क्या question है?
The logo is not transferable. The logo can be used by all those who are part of the association or who are authorized, registered as authorized users. But let's take the example of Banarsi saris. That logo cannot be transferred to an association which is outside the geographical area for which the GI tag has been provided. Hope that clarifies, Dr. Indira.
I cannot open a shop also outside from that area. I open a showroom outside. I am producing it in Banaras.
No, you can do that. Absolutely not a problem.
You are getting champagne throughout the world. Lord, Champagne is a place in France, but
You can certainly sell it in Delhi through a showroom. You can call it Banarsi saris and brocade, provided it's produced in the district for which the GI tag has been claimed.
I think with that we complete the Q&A session. And there is no online or offline question. So thank you very much, Dr. Das, for this very elaborative lecture. And let's give him a big hand.
तो आपसे मैं एक पूरे दिन का इसमें कभी करवाइए जब टाइम लगता है
Question
और
है?
आप साहब
क्या?
को पकड़ लीजिए छोड़िए
What is that?
वो कुछ लेने गया था
नहीं, वो ठीक है. So, Dr. Das, very informative lecture. So my compliments to you for your insights which you have in this GI. Let me also add a few examples. Like I know personally this case of Navara. I know the owner of